Hey, hello everyone. It's nice to have you again in this video series about the Conscious Collective of Unity 13. Let me share with you the presentation. Okay, I got it now. So I was welcome you, and today I am talking about consciousness in relation to the energy of this new lunar cycle which begins the sunset, the sunset of April 17th, 2026. And that's the energy or qualities associated with the zodiac sign of Taurus, viewed from the lens of Kabbalistic astrology. And those qualities are connectivity, beauty, comfort, and healing. Sorry. Well, 30 days ago, we started over again the lunar calendar with the Aries zodiac sign. And during that Aries period, we had the energy of the beginnings, impulse, strength, and creativity. And I say those attributes led us to inner freedom. And it was a process that required breaking down all old patterns that no longer match with our current consciousness level. Now in Taurus, we continue the natural flow where the creative energy settles and takes shape through an emotional process. And that's exactly what Taurus brings us. And I am starting with this. Uh, as I mentioned before, the perspective I'm sharing comes from what I learned in studying Kabbalah. And from that point of view, Kabbalistic astrology tells us that the analysis of each lunar cycle is based on the relationship between the meaning and energy of two Hebrew letters. One related to the planet that rules the zodiac sign, and the second letter rules its constellation. This is described in a book called the Sefer Yetzirah, or in English, the Book of Formation, whose oral tradition is attributed to Abraham the patriarch around the year 2000 BCE. However, the biblical texts tell us that guy was born and raised in Ur of Chaldea, which we later came to understand was referring to Sumerian civilization, where today is located Iraq. So, my interpretation about that is that astrological knowledge dates back to approximately the year 4000 BCE, connected to the Sumerian moon god Nanal. And that means I am talking about astrological knowledge that has been inherited and developed over more than 6,000 years ago up to the present moment. But returning to the Hebrew letters, that book tells us that what are those letters associated with the month of Taurus, known in the Hebrew calendar as Iyar. And those letters are, these letters are the letter Bab and the letter Pei. The letter Bab is associated with the constellation of Taurus, and the letter Pei associated with the planet Venus. And according to that knowledge, these are the two elements that rule the zodiac sign. Then the letter Bab was used to create the Taurus constellation, and its central meaning is connection. It represents the channel through which divine light descends into the material world. and is literally the bridge between the spiritual and physical worlds. But trying to explain this better, I am bringing back the diagram of the tree of life, which I use when analyzing the soul. In that framework, creation is divided into worlds or levels of reality. I mean, um, these are the four levels, and it's the emanation, creation, formation, and the world of the matter, or uh, the physical world, or what is manifested. And there is also a fifth level that acts as a bridge between them and the source, or the infinite, or whatever you want to call it. That is the Adam Kadmon. But well, it's called here the infinite, but you can call it whatever you want. So the letter Vav um, symbolizes that connecting bridge. And I want to go deeper here because if we look at the Hebrew letters that form that famous name of God used in Judaism as Yud Hey, Vav Hey, Yud Hey, Vav Hey, the study of Kabbalah tells us these letters is not a word, but makes more sense as an anagram. Then has no pronunciation because nobody really knows how to pronounce it. Anyway, a letter was pronounced as Yahweh or Yova. However, from mysticism, these letters are not related to any god. And more recently, esoteric teaching says that the closest pronunciation of those letters could be the way we breathe. But that's another intense, deep, and crazy topic. But instead, the Kabbalistic sages says that that name makes more sense if we think about it as a creation system, where these letters are also associated with the tree of life, especially with the worlds of creation, as following. As we can see here, the word of emanation is associated with the letter U, and is at the top of the tree, is where all the information or everything exists in potential form, or the connection, the starting, the information from the infinite start emanating into this creation. And here we find we find the letter Yud, and it's about these two spheres or sephirot, Keter and Chokhmah. At the same level, in the left here, we have the world of creation, represented by the first letter He. This is where creation just begins, so space and time. And also is here where the idea of God appears or emerges. Here, the infinite wisdom is organized and begins to take shape. Next comes the word of formation associated with the letter Bab. This is one of the letters we are studying tonight. And getting into the lowest level, we got the physical world, the world of manifestation, and is also represented by the letter He, the second of the name of Yud He Vav He. And here it's because it's put it here because is supposed to be creating a coherent flow from the idea of creation to what's finally manifested. But returning to the letter Bab, I've said it is a bridge that connects the higher worlds with the physical world. And this process of formation is a flow of energy. In Kabbalah, is also called the world of emotions. And there are two interesting points here because the first point is in English, the word emotion literally means energy in movement, emotion. Second, this level of formation includes six stages or spheres or energy because in Kabbalistic numerology, known as gematria, the letter Bab has the numerical value of 6 because it refers to these stages of formation. And this process of 6 sephiroths flows as following. The first sephirah is Hesed in the right here, understood as love or mercy. And this tells us that every creative process, including the creation of this reality, started with love or mercy. At the left, at the left column, we continue with the Sephirah of Geburah, which represents desire, but also includes discipline, power, and strength. Going to the center, we got the Sephirah of Tiferet, which is the beauty and the balance that provided provides the balance between love and desire. Love and desire. So it's balance here. All we know that everything we see beauty got a balance. But also between all the qualities just mentioned in Chesed and Geburah. But then following to the Sephirah of Netzach at the right, uh, that means the perseverance of the consciousness of giving, which keeps the energy of the process alive. And for this reason, it's also called the victory. Next, going to the left, we got the Sephirah of Hoth with D, not with T, and that means the humility. In other words, the recognition that the creative idea came from a higher dimension that our rational mind cannot fully understand. I will get further into this Sephirah, Hoth, when I explain the letter P, since they are very involved. And finally, the last Sephirah in the word of formation is Yesod, meaning the foundation or connection. This is the last stage before the physical manifestation. Everything must be connected here and grounded across all previous stages and across all the levels too. In other words, the energy or thought that flowed from the infinite source was organized and given form through this process. So when it reaches at this point of Yesod, and in a coherent way, action and manifestation in the physical world happen by default because reflexes the world process. In other words, once you reach this point, do not do something different because you will practically be destroying the creation, whatever it might be. So, in broad terms, that's what this letter back represents: connection. But why this matter for this lunar cycle? Because, as I already said, the month of Taurus or ER brings us beauty, comfort, and connectivity, and also carries the energy of healing. And that means that I will be healed over the next 30 days. Of course not. Uh, but it's a good opportunity to balance the emotions and avoid illness because Kabbalistics have known for thousands of years that the origin of illness comes from emotional imbalance, which is exactly what biodecoding also tells us today. So while the previous lunar cycle gave us a push to get off of certain internal slavery and made liberation a little bit easier, now in Taurus that energy settles and takes shape through the emotional process. In the package of negative aspects to face in the Taurus month for the next 30 days, or better say for the next 30 nights, the challenge is not staying in the comfort zone. And how this relate to the emotion? Because the emotion is energy in movement, and when energy gets stuck, it's wasted, or in this case, brings illness, just like water does. And it's important to know that water is another way to represent the world of formation, relating water directly to emotion. And how emotion gets stuck through fear or through imbalances in any of the emotional stages from the world of formation or from the world of the emotion. I already explained the specific imbalances in each sephira in the soul analysis video, but there is an additional point I want to bring here is the concept of consciousness. If we go to the etymological meaning of these words, and maybe is better understood in Spanish because the word is the word conciencia that comes from Latin con equal to with or together and sire equal to know. Therefore, consciousness means to know with or to know together, or a shared set of knowledge with wisdom. At a simple level, it means becoming aware. But if we go to a deeper level, it is the field where all experience take place. So I can say that consciousness is the set of intellectual and emotional knowledge we use to connect with the physical world, but also with other people, and also with different dimensions of the reality. And I could also say that gaining consciousness requires knowledge and connection. These two words that share the same Latin root and in Spanish are conocimiento, knowledge, and conexión, equal to connection. Actually, they sounds pretty similar, but then together these three words, consciousness, knowledge, and connection, give us the ability to perceive and to relate with the reality. So we gain knowledge or consciousness through the connection between wisdom and understanding, involving the experience of the emotion. And that's and that's and that is what the letter BAP represents. That connecting bridge that gives us knowledge and consciousness through the coherent connection of the formation process. So, placing that in terms of educational psychology, it will be understood as the integration of cognitive processes with the learning gathered from emotional intelligence. With all this, I could say the potential of what the letter BAP represents when it's properly balanced is mature and conscious emotion. But now let's move to the letter P study, which represents, I'm sorry, which represents the astrological influence associated with the planet Venus. As I say, I'm sorry. As I said, is the other element that rules the month of Taurus. So from Venus, we can observe associated settings like beauty, sensuality, magnetic, magnetic social presence, harmony, and artistic expression. And all of this is reflected in verbal expression. In other words, communication. And this makes sense with the literal meaning of the letter P because in Hebrew language means mouth. And it's not a coincidence that Taurus is associated with a throat in the human body because the mouth represents the doorway to either healing or destroying, depending on how the speaking is used. In the words we use about ourselves, about others, and about the realities around us. And because of that, the month of Taurus, associated with the letter P, makes sense in the energy of healing. Not because healing happens automatically or passively, but because we got the opportunity to observe how we are managing our inner flow, especially in the way we express it. So if the emotion is energy in motion, when that energy is not expressed properly, gets stuck. And when energy gets stuck, it becomes distorted. And when that happens, begins to manifest an imbalance both emotionally and physically. This is also where biodecoding considers with Kabbalah teachings, saying that illness have their origin in an unresolved internal conflict, in a repressed emotion, or in an incoherence between what we feel, what we think, and what we express. And trying to explain this better, I am returning to the Tree of Life, where verbal expression is linked to the Sephirah of Hod. The mouth only is connected to the Sephirah of Malhut, the realm of manifestation. And this means that speech is only fully realized when it is expressed through the physical vocal system. However, before reaching that point, it goes through an inner process shaped by thoughts and emotions. Then imbalances arising in thoughts come from using destructive criticism, excessive judgment, gossip, expression of anger, fear of or victimhood, with bad faith or manipulation. And that's why the mouth, represented by the letter P, or or yeah, represented by the letter P, is not just a tool for communication; it's a tool for creation or destruction. And watching this from the gematria, the numerical value of the letter P is the number 8. While this number is traditionally associated with the representation of the infinite, in Kabbalah is considered what is above of the natural. So that means that speaking is comes from a place that is not natural, or in other words, is above the material world of the world of formation, the world, the material world on the world of formation. And that places that number here in the Sephirah of Binah or Bijoin, because this is the 8th Sephirah. If you count from Malchut to Chesed or Gevurah, they are 7 Sephiroths. Then we got the 8 in Binah, where is the creation. Because Binah takes place at the top of the left column in the tree of life, from where the ordering and organizations of ideas descends, then passes through the limitations and power of Geburah to be later shaped as a structured language by the emotional statement that represents heart, where is the humility or reconnection or recognition of its use, to finally be expressed by the mouth. In other words, where is where God manifestation. And with this, I can say the word or speech, when aligned with consciousness, doesn't only describe the reality, but also is organized. So, as I've said, consciousness means to know and to connect. Then, the way we speak reveals the level of connection or consciousness we got. And we don't speak from at this level, we don't speak from what we believe we know. We speak from what we have truly integrated. Therefore, the actual meaning of healing in this month of Taurus is not about being cured from something external, but about recovering inner coherence, about aligning what we think, what we feel, and what we express. Because when we reach that alignment, energy flows naturally. And when energy flows, balance appears. And when there is balance, the body responds, or the opposite. As I said, the body is part of the physical world, or the matter is the physical world related to the world of Asia in the tree of life. And in this way, the animal doesn't know the lie or cheating. We can intellectually create truths, and when we say them, that uh, they become fixed into the body. But if we end up doing something different from that intellectual declaration, the body asks, what happened here? This is not what you told me. And the body holds on to that first programming. In other words, if there is no coherence between the process of creation, I mean, between what we think, say, and do, then distortion of energies is also reflected into the body and is where we feel it. This is what PNL is about. And that's why the challenge of in this month of Taurus is do not stay in the comfort zone because the comfort zone is not the same as well-being. It's simply avoidance, it's not saying, nor acting, or not expressing out of fear of breaking an apparent stability. And there is also the additional challenge of balancing the use of speech, as I already mentioned. So this cycle of the Taurus month is not just about feeling more or understanding more. It's about expressing with consciousness, about allowing the entire process from the idea to the emotion to reach its natural point of manifestation without distortion. Because in the end, the use of the words can make us sick, but also can heal us if we learn to use it in a coherent and conscious way, not just in our life, but also through the reality we all share. And with all that said, I think is more than enough to understand the challenges that is this coming Taurus month brings. However, today we are still in the final hours of Aries energy because tomorrow comes Taurus and the challenge grows because Taurus influence makes us focus in the comfort zone. And I am aware that each person has their own challenge in their own way. But as an example, I want to share how I made use of Aries energy. First, getting back to exercising, it was an idea that was driving me crazy a long time ago because I felt stuck and heavy. And I have to say, exercising is another way to set energy in motion. Second, I started guidance programs to help individuals remember their greatness and their power through the study of their tree of life. And third, I create some digital spaces for conscious community locally here in Guadalajara to develop actions about freedom, consciousness, and decentralization. I know it's a big job, but I got that first impulse of Aries. And, and with all that said, I know the challenge coming in Taurus is to keep going with a mature emotion and not stop when things become uncomfortable because that's something that happens to me often. But as I said, each person knows their own challenge. Well, as conclusions here, to integrate this teaching in the Taurus month, we can focus in two key insights: connection and getting out of the comfort zone. And that could be understood as reconnecting with yourself, your inner power, or your tree, reconnecting with others because we know What truly connects us with other people is the emotion. Reconnecting with nature, keeping in mind that your body represents the entire physical world, but especially reconnecting with your purpose. In other words, what you truly came for. And that can also be achieved allowing healing through emotional balance in each of the mentioned stages, through inner work, not getting stuck in the comfort zone, and acting when we feel the uncomfortable moment. And finally, through coherent conscious connection with all the dimensions of your being and with authentic connection with others. So the next time we see or think about the letters Bab and Peg, or the Taurus constellation, or planet Venus, you can meditate about all, say, here. And with this, I finish this presentation. And I want to thank you for being here. And I'll see you in the next video.